I haven't exactly been hiding the fact that maybe one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to in 2021 is the return of Fernando Alonso to Formula 1 with the newly rebranded Alpine team. There is so much that excites me about this storyline, not least of which is the driver at the heart of it. Opinions on Fernando Alonso range throughout the Formula 1 community, and trust me, I've seen it for myself. In fact, in a recent episode of Talking Points over on the Veloce channel, both me and my co-host Tomo, along with FNG aka Neewer, had a very fun and saucy debate about the return of Fernando Alonso in 2021, and trust me on this one, when it comes to me and Tomo and Fernando, it's the epitome of a verbal sparring match. So if you're interested, then definitely go check that video out. The link will be in the description below. But there is no doubt that his return has so many moving pieces, from the team who have recently changed their team principal, Esteban Ocon who will want to bounce back after a disappointing season in 2020, and then of course there's the return of Fernando himself. And now, to be honest, I haven't really talked that much in depth about Alonso's return on my channel, so that is why in this video I'm going to be looking at why did he decide to return after 2 years away from the sport. Will his return live up to the hype? And also, short of winning a championship, what would be a successful return for the two-time world champion? So, there is no other place to start other than by asking, why is Alonso back? Well, he himself has said on many occasions throughout 2020 that it was simply a case of still loving the sport and believing that he still had what it took to not only just make up the numbers, but fight at the very front. When Fernando left at the end of 2018, it was a really strange and, in my opinion, disappointing end to an incredible F1 career, because the misconceptions that I hear all the time is that there is no way Fernando will be anywhere near as good as he was in his prime during his championship winning years, which was now 15 years ago. But that's not technically true, because in my opinion, Fernando was in his absolute prime when he was at Ferrari, even though he wasn't winning titles. And even when he left McLaren in 2018, to me, actually watching him that year with the equipment that he was given, he was still prime Fernando at the peak of his driving and racing ability. I mean, in 2018, not only did he whitewash his teammate in qualifying, but he also scored 81% of McLaren's points that season. And at the end of the year, all of the team principals voted in a poll and voted Fernando as the 4th best driver of the season, in front of Daniel Ricciardo and behind Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel, despite the fact that, unlike the others, he didn't get a single win, pole or podium and finished down in 11th in the championship. And I've always said this, and I will continue to say this for the rest of my life, but had Alonso been in that 2018 Ferrari, he would have took that car at the very least to a championship decider against Lewis Hamilton, because that is just how good he was. And well, we've seen him do it with much, much worse. So to me, the question is not, is he going to be as good as he was 15 years ago? It's, can he get anywhere near as close as he was only 2 years ago? And that is why on that timeline, although there is no doubt that he will not be 100% of the driver that he was in 2018, I seriously doubt a driver as good as Fernando Alonso is going to completely fall off the cliff in the space of 2 years. The thing that can't be beaten, however, is the age factor, and this is something that Fernando is going to have to use all of his years of experience to try and get around, or try and make sure that he can make all of the necessary changes and sacrifices in his life to make sure that he is mentally and physically performing to the best of his abilities, because when he does make his return to Formula 1, he will be 39 years old, which, although is 2 years younger than Kimi, who is still beating teammates even into his 40s, it's 3 years older than Lewis and 6 years older than Seb. The biggest comparison to Fernando's comeback, of course, is the famous return of Michael Schumacher back in 2010. Now, I've already done an in-depth video on this because it's such a complex comparison, so check it out if you haven't seen it already. But the one thing that I do want to say is that despite his age, Alonso, by the time he finishes his 2-year contract, will actually still be younger than Schumacher was when he made his return in 2010. From the Renault and Alpine perspective, and just to make it easier on me, whenever I refer to them in 2020, I'll call them Renault, and whenever I talk about them in 2021, I'll call them Alpine because I'm starting to lose my mind over here over the whole name thing. But anyway, from the Renault perspective, this was a no-brainer. Losing Daniel Ricciardo was a massive blow to the team. He clearly didn't believe enough in the Alpine project and decided to jump ship for the McLaren boat, which left Renault in a really sticky situation with no surefire #1 driver that would be able to deliver consistent results and lead the team, something that Esteban Ocon clearly is not able to do just yet. The options for Renault in terms of drivers was pretty limited. Sebastian Vettel was available at the time, and there is no doubt that some kind of negotiations definitely took place, although not only is Vettel not quite the surefire driver he once was, in the end he chose Aston Martin anyway. Drivers like Perez and Hulk were also available, but Perez had a bit of a history with Esteban Ocon, which the team probably wanted to avoid, and as for Hulk, well, not only is he not really a #1 driver, but the team literally kicked him out only the season before, so that would have been pretty awkward in itself. So in the end, Fernando Alonso, who was actively looking for a seat that would be worth his time, almost became the best and most realistic option, and not only were they getting a great driver and someone with bags of experience that could fit that #1 role, but he had a very famous relationship with the Renault brand, which meant that the people running the team would have someone they could trust to take them forward. What's really interesting looking back is that when Alonso was confirmed, there was a huge amount of backlash, especially from a lot of YouTubers and people online over the fact that Renault didn't promote one of their young drivers. People were angry and started to call into question the point of having a junior program if you don't promote them to the Formula 1 team, and many people thought that someone especially like Guan Yu Zhou should have been given the seat instead of an older driver like Alonso. And here's the thing, I said at the time, if I was Renault, there is no way I am trusting a factory team in the hands of a decent midfield driver like Esteban Ocon and a young, unproven driver like Guan Yu Zhou unless they turn out to be a generational talent like a Leclerc or Russell, and even then, the first year would not be a guaranteed success. And what's even more interesting is that despite all the things that people said about how Renault should give the seat to either Lundgaard or more likely Zhou, guess what? In the end, they both did not get enough super license points to even get into Formula 1, meaning that even if either of them were given a seat, they literally couldn't have been promoted to F1 even if Renault wanted them to be. So in the end, I just find it really ironic that despite all of the outcry from the fans over how the whole Renault Driver Academy is useless and let's all have a go at Renault really turned out to be all for nothing. And let's be honest guys, looking at the stacked lineups for 2021, McLaren having Ricciardo and Norris, Ferrari having Leclerc and Sainz, Aston Martin having Stroll and hopefully a resurgent Sebastian Vettel, if Renault did promote one of their young drivers, how much confidence does a lineup of Ocon and Zhou give you right now going into 2021? I mean, be honest with yourself. And unless you are in denial, it's very obvious why Renault needed to take, admittedly, a little bit of a risk and go with Alonso as their surefire #1 driver. And just to clarify, I'm not saying #1 in terms of team orders or preferential treatment or anything like that. I'm talking about your main driver who guarantees you top level performances in every single race, doesn't crack under pressure, who consistently performs from the beginning to the end, who will help lead the team and help develop the car not just for this year, but going into the 2022 regs, and also personally someone who just radiates trust and confidence throughout the team, from the mechanics in the garage, the strategists on the pit wall, the engineers back at the factory, or even the key decision makers all the way up at the top at Renault who actually run the Alpine team. That is the pressure and expectation of being the star #1 driver, and it's the same for every single team, whether it would be Ricciardo at McLaren or Hamilton at Mercedes. That is what Alpine need and expect from Alonso, and that is why they decided to back him for the next 2 years. Now, when it comes to Fernando and what he's like as a person, he is a very passionate driver. He's got a never give up mentality which is mixed with his unbelievable competitiveness, his relentless desire to win, and of course, he wants to prove that he is the best like all drivers do. However, we also know that in the case of Fernando, it can be a double-edged sword. To me, his talent will always be up there with the likes of Hamilton, but he sometimes doesn't have the same control over his emotions that Lewis does, and that has been to his detriment, especially at McLaren, where he was caught in a really frustrating situation for everyone involved in the project, and there is no doubt that his leadership style clearly had some role to play in how the situation played out. To me, I've always been defensive about this when it comes to Fernando, because whilst I'm sure looking back, even he'd handle some things that happened at McLaren differently if he could, everyone is different, and not everyone is this perfect person who just quietly says nothing when the team are clearly underperforming and are giving him mediocre cars year after year, and then at the start of every single season keep making claims and promises that they fail to deliver on. The thing about Fernando is that whenever people criticize him, they talk about his temperament and how sometimes that can have a negative effect on a team, and there is no doubt that there is validity in that argument, but the one thing that you will never hear people criticize is his driving ability, because again, from a purely driving aspect, Fernando is one of the all-time greats, and given a good enough car, there is no argument as to why he wouldn't be able to fight with the likes of Hamilton. I think people forget or maybe want to ignore that Fernando was really that good. However, whether he will still be the old Fernando in 2021, well, that's purely subjective to what you believe as an individual. So, with all of this expectation and a fair bit of skepticism from a lot of Formula 1 fans, there certainly is a lot of hype for the return of Fernando Alonso, with some people wanting to see how he'd fare after 2 years out of the sport, and now having to get used to these new cars and what he'll be capable of on his return. And then there's also a certain amount of people, many of whom I am sure are watching this video, who are secretly hoping for Fernando's comeback to end up in tears, and are just anticipating the entire team will go up in smoke. Regardless, the hype is real, but for Alpine and Alonso, that doesn't really help. What is a big problem, however, for the team, and something that will hamper Fernando, is the huge decrease in potential track time. Now, for drivers like Sainz or Vettel who are moving into a new team, although they are going into new machinery, they're obviously very used to the current regulation of cars, so for them it won't be as big of an issue in 2021. For Fernando, he hasn't had a lot of mileage in the current cars, and even since 2018, there have been lots of changes from aero regs to fuel restrictions that will hamper a returning driver. What makes this an even bigger issue is the fact that in 2021, pre-season testing has been massively reduced compared to 2020. Last year, the teams got a total of 6 days spread over the course of 2 weeks. However, this year, testing has been cut in half, with only 3 days over the course of 1 week of pre-season testing. This is a massive problem because for a returning driver, that really limits the amount of time that he has just to get used to and get comfortable with not only his brand new team, but also a brand new car. So in the case of Alonso, funnily enough, his lack of time in the current regulation F1 cars will be less similar to Sainz, Vettel or Ricciardo who are going into new teams, and it will be more similar to the preparation of the rookies like Tsunoda and Schumacher who are going into new teams and completely alien cars. And to be honest, since we are on the subject, and speaking of young drivers, this is exactly why Renault did everything that they could in their power to get Alonso into that young drivers test in Abu Dhabi, because every single lap getting used to the current regs is so valuable due to the lack of running. So even though the premise of a 39-year-old in a young driver test is a little bit ridiculous, I don't blame Renault in the slightest for trying to do everything that they can to prepare Fernando in the best way possible given the current restrictions and unique circumstances. And on the subject of the Abu Dhabi test, Alonso, as always, is not only a box office driver on the track, but he just can't stop creating headlines off it. And yet again, he managed to steal the headlines by setting not only the fastest time of the test, but also setting a time quicker than what both of the Renault drivers were able to do during qualifying for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, whether this means nothing or everything is once again totally down to you. It definitely impressed me a little bit because the cars are literally identical to those of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend, as the FIA didn't allow the teams to run any new or experimental parts, and also they used the exact same compound of tyres as the F1 drivers did in Abu Dhabi as well. Now, whilst I'm not going to go completely over the top and now say that Fernando is now even quicker than Daniel Ricciardo after literally just one test, what it does show me is that Fernando Alonso is not messing about and that he's not going to be slow out of the blocks and playing that catch-up game at the back of the grid. He's clearly gotten up to speed very quickly in that car, and that has got to be a massive relief not only for Alonso but more so for Alpine going into 2021. So, will Alonso's comeback live up to the hype, and will he be a success? Well, in terms of living up to the hype, me personally, I do not need to clarify that this is just my opinion. I'm backing Fernando 100%, and if Formula 1 has taught me anything, great drivers don't need a race or 2 or 5 to be right there and on the money, and whilst I do think that his window is closing fast due to his age, I fully expect in 2021, provided that Alpine produce a capable car and aren't playing the catch-up game like they were last year, for Alonso to immediately be fighting amongst the best in the midfield from the moment we get to the first race in Bahrain, and I am not going to be surprised if Esteban Ocon gets a big shock in terms of just how good Alonso will be from day one. In terms of is this going to be a successful comeback or not, it's ridiculously impossible to say, because arguably the real test will be in 2022 when the new rigs will be introduced, and only Alpine and Alonso will truly know what a success will be to them. To me, certainly in 2021, if Renault continue their trajectory from last year, I'm expecting Alonso to be a consistent performer and finish somewhere, maybe possibly in the top 5 or 6 in the championship, scoring possibly 1 or 2 podiums over the course of 2021 with a much more packed calendar, because that is what Ricciardo was able to do last year, and that is what Alonso has been brought in to deliver as well. However, in terms of 2022, all I can give is pure speculation, but if Fernando Alonso comes back to his best in 2021, and then if Renault can produce a car that is capable of wins in 2022, and that is a very big if, by the way, do not be surprised, and I'm saying this now, do not be surprised to see Alonso go out with a bang in 2022 and produce one last potential championship push to finish off his career like he always should have, leaving whilst fighting at the top and not falling out of love with the sport whilst being restrained at the bottom. Now, whether or not he will be a success this year and how he will do in 2021, do not worry guys. If he does well, if he does badly, I'm going to cover him either way, and you guys know me. If he does do badly, I'm not going to BS around it, and I'm going to give my critical and honest opinion if that does happen. But yeah, I cannot wait to cover Fernando in 2021 because, as I've always said, he's box office, he's headlines, he's controversy, and to me personally, as a fan of his, as a fan of Vettel and Hamilton and that era of drivers, which is my era of drivers, I absolutely love these guys because they make Formula 1 special to me. So yeah, I cannot wait for Formula 1 in 2021, and Fernando is a very big reason for that. Well guys, there you go. That is my video on Fernando Alonso. Now let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. I can't wait to see what you guys think because I love talking about opinions, and this is what this channel is all about, and whether you agree or disagree with me, that's totally fine. In fact, I love having debates and reading different opinions. So again, when it comes to Fernando and 2021, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. I can't wait to check them out. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of spicy stuff in there. Anyway, I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, then don't forget to drop a like and smash that subscribe button. Once again, we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and also don't forget to check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above, and guys, I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.